My name is Heather Vokush, and welcome to Witnessing History. Now, today we're delighted to be joined by Corinne Willinger. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I understand that you were born in 1927 in the Bronx.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
It was what I would consider an ordinary childhood. I lived in the West Bronx at the time and went to the public schools in the Bronx. My father was a dentist. He came to the United States at the age of 6 months, but he struggled and worked to become a dentist. In fact, he never even graduated high school. But in those days, you were able to go to dental school, which is now Columbia University. And so we weren't poor. At the same time, we went through the terrible depression, and it affected everybody. There were times that were very difficult for us. There was always food to eat, and it was never that kind of thing. We were cramped into a 2-bedroom apartment, and I know at one point during the depths of the Depression, my aunt and uncle came to live with us because they had no place to live, they had no money, no jobs, and for a couple of months they lived with us, and this was a 2-bedroom apartment, so there wasn't that much room with it. Everybody, except maybe the very rich, who did not jump out the windows during the crash. And I remember I always wanted to play the piano. I always wanted to learn the piano. My parents could not afford a piano, so I used to take lessons and I used to practice. And the lessons cost $0.25 a lesson from a guy, a man who was, desperate to teach.
Yeah.
But I didn't get to take those lessons till I was 13 years old. We all suffered through the Depression. In 1941, I think it was, or 42, my brother was able to go to a school, an out-of-town school. At that point, things were much better. And he spent a year at Indiana University. But my parents made him come back to NYU and go there for a year because he knew he was going to be drafted, because any young man in those days inevitably would get drafted.
You said that your father had come here just as a baby. Where had your father come from?
Oh, he came from Austro-Hungary.
Okay, and he came here because why?
Looking for a better life. It was a Jewish family.
Okay.
And many in that area. I know my mother's, who was born in Russia, in Ukraine, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
But she always called it Russia. It was always Russia. She came at about the age of 6 because there really were pogroms and vast discrimination.
So you came from a family of immigrants who came to New York looking
Both
for a better life.
had large families.
You mentioned your brother. How many brothers and sisters?
I only had one brother.
Just one brother.
Right.
Okay. So then this is you're maybe around 14, 15 or something like that. What do you remember of World War II when you first heard that something was going on? What are your memories?
At the beginning, I was only about 14.
Yeah.
And I remember that I went to the movies with my mother and father, and we saw The Maltese Falcon. It was a very famous movie, and it's still well known. And when we got out of the movie, everybody in the bus that we were on said, the war is on. The war was on.
Really?
That's how we found out.
So leaving the Maltese Falcon, do you remember any kind of build-up to what the war would be?
Even before Pearl Harbor, because that was the whole thing with Pearl Harbor. There was a build-up, and there was a lot of talk about war. And my father, who was always left-wing, he was active with the Spanish. It was pre-World War II, the Spanish Civil War.
Okay.
He was part of a dental group that was for the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War. I did not know much about politics. I was
just
very
a
young
kid, yeah.
for politics. And I knew also about the terrible treatment of Jews in Germany. As a matter of fact, there was one evening in my house where a man who had just come from Germany came, and all my father's friends came, and he told them all about the troubles, the tribulations he had escaping. Now, I don't remember the incidents. I don't remember if he had been in a death camp or anything like that, because I was about 8 years old at that time.
You were in the room listening to this.
But I was in the room. I heard it all. I don't know how much sense it made to me.
Right.
But, I knew what was going on.
I guess the war must have really begun to hit home for you when your brother was drafted.
Even before he was drafted, the fact that they expected him to be drafted and that they made him leave the college that he loved and go to NYU. And I remember at NYU, certain things stick in your mind. He was on a picket line because they were going to raise, it had nothing to do with the war, but I guess they were going to raise the fees from $13 to $13.50 a point. The reason, it sticks in your mind because you hear about college now is thousands and thousands of dollars.
But still, so he was a politically active guy at that time. And were you close with your brother?
I wasn't close with him because he was 5 years older than me.
Okay.
But I lived in the same room as he.
Right.
So I was very aware. I knew many of his friends.
And how did your family handle it when he left, when he was drafted?
Well, they were very unhappy, and but it was the war, and that's what it was like a different kind of war than you have today. Everybody does their own thing. Nobody, there's no such thing as a draft. So, but it was expected. They figured he was going to sooner or later have to go into the service.
Where did he go? Where was he drafted to?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember that. I know that he disappeared, and last seen in the Metz area, which is the Alsace-Lorraine border of France and Germany, that area. He disappeared at that point and just went off he was behind the lines, but he went off on a 24-hour pass, never was seen again.
Okay, so your brother was drafted, he was sent who knows where, and then how long was it between that beginning point and when he disappeared? Years or months?
Over a year.
So we'll definitely return to that. Now, what was going on with you here in the States, in high school, I guess you were?
I was in high school.
Right after he was drafted. I heard that you, at that point, started to explore your own activism.
I got involved in an organization called American Youth for Democracy.
Okay.
And it was all in war efforts. It was a left-wing group, a radical group, but at that point, everybody that I knew were doing everything for the war. I mean, the war in World War II affected everybody in one way or the other. Of course, it affected my family, especially because of my brother first leaving and then disappearing. And that was devastating for my parents and my mother and father.
Oh, I mean, clearly.
Yeah.
Again, let's just go back a little bit. So you're in this left-wing radical group in high school. This is before you knew that your brother had disappeared. What were your goals, or what were you guys working on back then?
It was mostly for the war effort.
For the war effort. What did you want to happen?
The groups that I was involved with, the American Labor Party at that time, and this American Youth for Democracy, were very much in favor of labor and of the war effort in terms of labor. And we had meetings, we sang songs. Pete Seeger, even in those days, was around. But he was part of a group, really, more than Pete Seeger himself. At that time, they were the Almanac Singers.
And the war effort in terms of labor, what does that mean? Can you give us more information about that?
There was like one song about the UAW.
Okay.
They pushed, it was the UAW-CIO, makes the Army roll and go, turning out those wheels and tanks and airplanes every day, etc.
Okay.
They were pushing for labor, but for everything, mostly for the war effort.
And then, possibly maybe a year later, like you said, then your brother disappeared. And what can you tell us about that? How did you find out?
They received a telegram, and that's how they found out. And then they told me my mother and father put in every effort to find him, because it wasn't only that, he didn't just die on the battlefield, he just disappeared. So that my father even ended up going down to Washington, because apparently at that time the Army will put up a search for a year, and then they stop. And he, of course, wanted them to continue. They tried every which way to find out what happened. Where they know he disappeared. It was a French-German area, which was quite anti-Semitic, and it could have been possible that something happened. He was taken that way. There were also mines in the area, but they searched through the areas where they thought the mines might have been. They never found anything. We had a relative who was a captain in my brother was just a first-class private, but this man was a captain. And we were able to put up signs. They were in French, and they were offering cartons of cigarettes as rewards for any information about the whereabouts that anybody had heard about Herbert Feit. That was my brother's name.
Now, how was that for you? At that time, you were, I don't know, maybe 16 or something, and your brother disappeared. How did you handle that?
Unfortunately, I didn't handle it. I ran away. I didn't run away physically, but emotionally, I could not stand it, because my mother was so completely overwrought. And my father, who was basically a fairly emotional man, unemotional man, pretty stoic, as a matter of fact, but at the same time, he got sicker and sicker, my father, and he went down. Before that, he went down to Washington to appeal to see if there could be any kind of help, and he came back with knowing they could not help him at all. Whichever way they turned, they were never able to get any information at all.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, you said your father got sicker and sicker. What was he sick from?
He eventually died.
Mm-hmm.
He had leukemia.
Okay.
And he died about 3 years after the original disappearance of my house.
Okay. All of this stress.
They claimed he had a faulty X-ray machine, which would cause leukemia. I always associated it with the death of my brother.
That's one angle that is very rarely looked at. It's like the impact on the family of the military members. You know, I mean, even today we don't really look at that enough. But hearing your story about your brother disappearing and how that, you know, continued for however many years, it's something that's very important. Now, you have had a really amazing career as an activist for so many decades. Do you connect that at all with the disappearance of your brother?
I do. My father, I told you, was left wing, and I probably would have remained left wing, but the very fact that of this tragedy, I feel makes me much more strongly opposed to war. I never saw much romance in it, and you know, in many ways, people try to romanticize war.
And you are, part of your activism is that you write these amazing lyrics to songs, and this is one of the things you do now. You were speaking before about comparing some of the kinds of songs from, you know, World War II to what you're doing now. Can you tell us some of the examples of what the left wing was doing in 1945 versus what the mainstream was doing music-wise?
Through the popular songs, you can see the difference, because the popular songs were "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." In other words, it was to the soldiers and how they were gone and how we wish they would come home. And of course, the left wing, the people that I was with, also wanted the soldiers to come home too.
Right.
But the songs that they sang, including Pete Seeger, were anti-fascist songs.
In fact, I think you've got one here with, you have some very interesting lyrics here, and so if we can look at possibly one of those.
I only remember pieces. That's my problem.
Yeah, can you share maybe a little tiny bit of one of those with us? One of your anti-fascist songs.
Well, this one I'm going to do because, well, there were two. One was the UAW-CIO, which showed that we were pushing for labor, and that then it's that UAW-CIO makes the army roll and go, turning out the jeeps and tanks and airplanes every day. We would never sing anything like that today. And this one was, keep your hands on that gun, hold on, hold on, Franklin D., hold on, Winston C., hold on, Chiang Kai-shek, hold on, Joseph Stalin, keep your hands on that gun, hold on.
Okay,
that
so the power of music to shape minds.
Right,
yeah.
well, right.
So what I would like to do now is to turn to some of the music that you're doing nowadays in shaping minds, but also I've got a little hat behind here that I would like you to explain. Here we go. Can you explain this hat?
I am a member of the Raging Grannies. I'm also a member of the Granny Peace Brigade, but the Raging Grannies is a group that it's a lot of groups, actually. It started in Canada, and we're all over Canada and the United States. And one of the things we do, we sing songs and change the lyrics of old and popular songs, and we wear these hats, and we wear, some of them wear all kinds of costumes purporting to be old ladies. The traditional old lady, that's why they put this on, because we're not very traditional.
So maybe the piano lessons did not continue way back when, but you still are using music in your activism. And you're very, very active in so many different areas, regarding this. Now, I believe you've got one of your current songs that you can share with us. So can you give us an update of a song?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I am not a singer.
That's okay.
I carry a tune.
Can you give it just really quickly? Give us an update.
Okay, this is a song that I wrote. This is very an up-to-date song. And it's about the NSA. I'm sitting on top of the world, just spying on you and everyone too. And now that your words are unfurled, no secrets can you ever undo. Now you should be happy, now you're never alone. Don't say something sappy, you've got a chaperone. I'm sitting on top of the world, spying on you and everyone too.
That's wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for having come here and shared your very powerful story regarding your brother, but also your very powerful story regarding how you have turned not only your love of music, but also your activism into something that, will go on and inspire people for so long. So thank you very much for sharing your beautiful song with us. And it's so interesting to see how you have combined, music with your activism, and also with your very painful family background, that you have turned into something, beautiful and educational for others. So in our last minute here, what I'm wondering is, if you had one message that you would like to share with young people everywhere, what would your message be?
Well, I think that it's very important to be active. It's not only, I think, helps puts meaning into your life, but we are living in an era that is so in need, I feel, of people standing up and demanding their rights and demanding taking back the democracy that we had. I mean, all during my life, it was a struggle, but there was always the feeling that there could be justice if you fought hard enough and long enough. And I'm beginning to get sour because I don't see that so much today.
You don't see people fighting for that?
I don't see enough people putting enough fight, and I see it's very easy to get very depressed because the world isn't getting any better. But the lyrics are. And so maybe, through your music, that's one, and your hats and all of this, it's a great way to activate people and to let them know it can be fun and inspiring, but at the same time extremely effective. And so it's an amazing message that you have shared with people. We thank you again so much for joining us today.
And we thank you for joining us as well, and we highly encourage you to visit websites of both the Granny Peace Brigade and the Raging Grannies so that you can hear more of their beautiful voices and especially Corinne's wonderful lyrics. We thank you very much for joining us.
I'm sitting on top of the world, just spying on you and everyone too. And now that your words are unfurled, no secrets can you ever undo. Now you should be happy, now you're never alone. Don't say something sappy, you've got a chaperone. I'm sitting on top of the world, spying on you and everyone too.